Um, it seems only 24 hours ago that some of us were in this room. Must be some sort of record. So it's very good of you all to come back, and to those who weren't here last night. I'm hoping that tonight's meeting will be a little shorter than that, and perhaps less contested in some areas. So we'll kick off then with, just for those of you who are watching perhaps on screen, an introduction to those who are on the top table. We're ably supported tonight from my right by Mike Galsworthy from the Estates team, Ash Watts, Community Environmental Services, Karen Hendrickson, who is Director of Resources, and Jason Spencer to my left, Democratic Services, Paul Wilson, Chief Executive, Caroline Leatherday, and James, John, apologies, and Sarah McGaughan, also from Democratic Services. So have we any apologies for absence, John?
Through you, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor Sue Bull, Councillor David Burton, Councillor David Chapman, Councillor Gareth G, Councillor Lucy Peacock, and Councillor Nick Wilton.
Thank you. There's nobody from the public registered to speak or indeed in the room. So we move on to item 3, which is members' interests. So if anyone has any, could they please declare them now? Okay. Leaders' announcements. Councillor Flitter, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't keep you long because I may just lose my voice, which some will say that that's a good thing. Well, the time has come and now we all know where we are with LGR. Despite the few comments from some local leaders, and I refer to our MCA reps, the result to me is disappointing, but none other than what we expected. From what I and others feared. It is a political muscle of Derby and Chesterfield that have influenced government wishes. There is no doubt that all councils will find the mechanics of reorganisation an unwelcome distraction from the day-to-day running of their high-quality services, and consultation with district councils has meant very little. Residents may also welcome the idea of only one council to contact, but do they realise that there will be a lot fewer councillors to represent them when decisions are made from miles away that affect rural Derbyshire? However, there is a chance that further representation on numbers of councillors can be made, but only if unanimously agreed by all affected councils. As a Liberal Democrat, I believe that unless proper thought is applied, this is as far away from localism and community life as you can possibly be. Despite the great savings projected within LGR, significant resources have already been spent and costs continue to rise at an alarming rate, and a share of that cost will be placed upon the Dales residents. This is why later in the agenda we must make proper provision to set aside from underspends and budget responsibly to protect our residents within the Dales. Whatever our views on local government throughout this council, we must now act in a grown-up way, tackle the issues and prepare for the future in the best possible way that we can. The political muscle I spoke about earlier appeared again at a recent SLB meeting when Paul and myself attended, when we were discussing the procurement of consultancy to take us through the final stage of LGR. A first-class report was prepared by the County Council officers, not politically, with a recommendation that we adopt a hybrid approach where the DCC were lead partners with a call-off position. That sounded fine to me, as the county are in a better place to manage the procurement than smaller districts. However, the Chesterfield leader used words that clearly gave the impression that a partnership was to achieve the end result, as long as it was a political result. So I'm afraid that I spoke against political bias in a partnership of goodwill, and that I had also issues with the county leader, but they were for another place. They were to be debated again at another time. The legal team then stepped in with advice, and thankfully at the end of the report as it stood was finally agreed unanimously. Last but not least, Chair, even though I had a serious fall just a few days earlier, injuring arm and leg and aided by my trusty stick, along with Neil, Paul and Ash, who was on a training course, attending the conference at Bournemouth. Again, it was a mixed selection of political speakers, of sponsors, and innovation stages were packed and networking with colleagues proved fruitful. But the major topics resolved around the usual concerns of financial resources, staffing, how to manage plans and projects, how to prepare for an uncertain future in local government, and also the government funding. We also met James McLaughlin, who left us for Sandwell, and his colleague, who were also on the course with Ash. James still follows the fortunes of this council. But my humble thanks have to go to Paul and Ash. You both showed immense compassion and concern over my injuries and well-being, and it was a pleasure to spend time with you, and your kindness throughout will not be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, all our best wishes, I'm sure, for your recovery. So, in the absence of the civic chair, we move on to receive the minutes from various committees. This is item 6 on the agenda. So that's Community and Environment Committee, 14th of May, Licensing and Appeals, 19th of May, Planning, 9th of June, Local Plan, 17th of June, and the Special Planning Meeting of Farleymore on the 30th of June, and Governance and Resources, 2nd of July. I'm looking for a proposer, please, for those to move on block. Councillor Dobbs, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Murphy, thank you very much. Can I see all those in favour, please? I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. So on to item 7 then. So this is questions from councillors. Councillor Hobson, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I wish you well after your accident, Councillor Flitter. I'm very sorry to hear about that. My first question is, will you now commit to removing the Middleton and Matlock Bath sites as potential traveller sites, particularly given that residents have repeatedly spoken at council meetings and recently written to all councillors expressing their worries and concerns about these potential sites only being paused? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson, and for your kind words. But I'm afraid the Progressive Alliance Administration is committed to identifying a permanent traveller site, and work continues in that respect. Until such time that the council is able to secure a permanent site, the council should have regard to the decisions taken on the 9th of December 2024 and keeping all options open in the event of a temporary traveller sites that are required prior to that permanent site being delivered.
Thank you, Chair. My supplementary, I'm sure those residents will be very disappointed to hear this. Can you give me a date today when you think that you will have achieved this objective?
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Hobson quite knows, this is not a new initiative. this has been going on for the last 20 years, and we came to a decision in December 24 to make sites available for summer and for winter. Without that possibility, we have to realise that travellers can come into Derbyshire Dales, park exactly where they want, and it would not only cost this council, but it would infuriate residents if we hadn't got somewhere that they could go, because it's a very, very difficult task to actually move people off those sites. Whether we intend to use those sites or not is a different matter according to circumstances.
Thank you. My second question is, the Wolds review stated that rebuilding trust with residents was essential. What specific actions have you taken to implement all the recommendations? And can you list exactly what measurable changes have been introduced? Professor Steve Martin has warned of serious and systemic governance questions. Do you accept that concern?
The short answer is no. I do not accept the contention that there is a serious and systematic governance questions. And such claims are not borne out by the findings of the Gritston Road Appeal Independent Inquiry. Whilst the inquiry identified procedural improvements which could be made, particularly in regard to the engagement of Rule 6 parties and the sharing of information, the inquiry concluded that the council could not be criticised in relation to government's arrangements, which led to the decision not to defend. At the time the decision was made, the inquiry concluded that the council was left with no other choice, but because none of the independent expert witnesses that it had engaged were in a position to support the respective reasons for refusal. It was also concluded that the council could not possibly have taken a decision which would have involved revealing its hand in open and public forum. The council accepted the findings of the independent inquiry and the recommendations agreed by the council, and they include the list of introducing formal guidance on engagement with Rule 6 parties, requiring consultants to consider and respond to relevant community evidence, strengthening the officer handover arrangements for major planning cases, reinforcing proportionate record keeping requirements, and ensuring that resident evidence is given proper consideration alongside statutory and consultee advice. Written guidance has been issued to officers and managers to these measures, and they have been embedded into planning and government processes. In terms of measurable changes, the council has introduced the formal record keeping checklist, introduced new Rule 6 guidance, reinforced consideration of community evidence by consultants, and officer handover requirements for major applications, and strengthened the expectations around recording key meetings and decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. I think any of us who attended the Farley Moor planning application or were indeed at the local plan meeting last night will have heard residents' views that they have submitted evidence at a very early stage and it has been repeatedly ignored. These people have got real worries in relation to the local plan going forwards. How will you personally rebuild trust with our communities?
I think that, sorry, Chair, I do think that trust is already beginning to take place. I think we have taken on board what the inquiry says, but I do disagree And it is possible for yourself or any member of the public to have their views, but the independent inquiry proved that the council acted in good faith, it acted properly, and that's where we will move forward, taking that advice.
Thank you. So item 8 then, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. That's the 28th of May and the extraordinary one on the 18th of June. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for moving those minutes, please? Okay, Councillor Slack and Councillor Dobbs. I'm not quite sure in which order there. Thank you. And all those in favour, please. I think that's unanimous. Yeah, thank you. Item 9, which is the provisional capital outturn 25-26 and the revised capital programme 26-27 to 2030-31. Karen, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks Council's approval for the provisional capital programme outturn for 25-26 and the revised programme for 26-27 to 2030-31. The outturn's provisional because it's still subject to external audit review of the Council's statement of accounts, which will take place later this year. So I'm sure members know the capital programme is the Council's plan of future spending on capital projects and on assets such as buildings, vehicles, large pieces of equipment and so on. The first part of the report presents the provisional financial position of capital spending for the financial year 25-26. And the report explains that capital expenditure last year was £4.15 million less than budgeted. But the report also indicates that we're seeking approval to carry forward almost all of that into 26, and explanations for under and overspends of £10,000 or more are shown in paragraph 2.4 of the report. The second part of the report seeks approval for the updated capital programme for 2026-27 and associated financing. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big revisions is to bring forward the slippage from 25-26. But the other main revisions relate to an addition of £953,700 for project 746, Local Authority Housing Scheme Round 4, £890,200 for project 747, a Baslow 3-unit affordable housing scheme, and £1.951 million £339 for project 748 housing pipeline schemes. These three projects, totalling just under £3.8 million, were approved by members at the council meeting in May as part of the housing strategy and delivery plan, and they demonstrate the council's commitment to providing affordable housing. I would like to apologise for an error and point out a typo on table 3 of the report on page 80, where it refers to the 3-unit affordable housing scheme in Bonsall. That should of course be Baslow. Table 4 in the report shows proposed financing for the revised programme of £24 million. Of that, £24 million, which is 73% of the programme, is financed by grants and contributions. So that's a significant amount, with the rest coming from capital receipts and reserves. And without those grants, projects such as Disabled Facilities Grants, Ashbourne Reborn, Hurst Farm Heritage Trail, and other projects, we wouldn't have been able to go ahead. A summary of reserve movements and balances is shown in Appendix 3, but you can see that paragraph 2.26 explains that grants, contributions and section 106 contributions are a large part of the reserves, And if we remove those which are set aside for specific projects, it only leaves around £330,000 of funding for new capital projects that might come along. Finally, I'd like to draw members' attention to paragraphs 2.19 to 2.21 of the report, which relate to project 652, shown as Matlock Bath Lovers Walk, which has a budget of £44,530. This budget had been previously earmarked to repair the damaged Tufa shelter in Lovers Walk, and as explained in the report, representations have been received from the International Council on Monuments and Sites, reproduced in Appendix 4, asking that the damaged shelter be replaced. A decision therefore needs to be made as to whether to proceed with the shelter scheme or remove it from the capital programme. If the scheme removed, an application for listed building consent would be necessary, and the advice that we've received is that that's unlikely to be successful. So I ask members to approve the 7 recommendations made in the report, but making a suitable amendment to recommendation 4 to indicate the approach that members would like to take regarding the shelter at Lovers Walk. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Do questions arise from members? Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. You might not be surprised. They're probably going to be for Mike rather than Karen. So I noticed in the report, it stated that the Tufa shelter was coming to the end of its operating life anyway. So I'm just, what would have happened if the tree hadn't destroyed it?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It would have required maintenance, it would have required work, and that would have been picked up alongside our normal monitoring of all of our assets. So it was, for those that don't know it, it was built of tufa, and it was a sort of half moon shaped shelter with quite a low roof, and it was the cracking of that roof that was starting to give some concern. So that would have needed some work. And obviously, a tree fell on it in the meantime and completely destroyed it. So yeah, we would have picked that up and maintained it. But I was just pointing out that it wasn't in perfect condition, I suppose, at the day when it was destroyed, but we would have been required to pick that up because, as we've said in the report, it is a listed building.
Sure.
Thank you.
So just a couple of follow-on questions. So we talk about rebuilding it or replacing it. We've kept most of the tufa, but not all. So to me, it boggles my mind really that we can recreate a heritage piece without the original pieces. And I just wonder whether you could explain that to me.
Through you, Chair, we have retained all of the stone that came from it. Not all of it is usable. The plan would be, and would have been, because we've been to tender on this previously, to base the design on the original structure and the original photographs and records that we have of it, and our colleagues in our planning department have of that structure, and recreate what was there. I think it's a simpler building than if it was a grade 2 listed house or something like that, with a lot of elements to it. It is basically a dome structure built of tufa. There was some work done on it as part of the Matlock Parks project approximately 20 years ago, to install uplighters and that sort of thing. But basically it's a fairly simple building in design terms, so it would be fairly simple to recreate that building, and using a proportion, I would say at least 50% of the original stone that it was built from originally. So I think it's a bit more than just a copy, and as part of the representations we've had from the International Council on monuments and sites, they are content with that approach, and indeed they've offered to help us with the specification to ensure that that meets their requirements and obviously the requirements of the listing.
Okay, just final question. So we rebuild this thing. How do we then safeguard against what that shelter had become for the local community, which was basically a place where, when people couldn't be bothered going to the proper toilets, they would use that as a toilet, both for excrement and for kind of as a urinal. And that's how I remember it. And I wondered if we're going to rebuild this. I wasn't displeased when it disappeared, because I thought, well, at least we've got rid of that scourge, especially because it's so near a children's playground. And now we're going to rebuild it. So can you tell me what the safeguards are going to be that we won't then let it fall back into what it was being used for?
Chair, if I can, I'll pick this up. I think it's really difficult, Councillor Whitehead, to mitigate against bad behaviour in all instances. It's not an area that is monitored throughout the day and throughout the evening. We know that it attracts a certain element of people and bad behaviour. We know that because our grounds maintenance team clean it out and have to tidy up after people leave things in there. I think there's different types of antisocial behaviour that take place there, and I think that's a conversation that we need to have with the police to increase patrols in the area. But we'll do as much as we can, but there is no way to fully mitigate against people using it for things that it's not designed for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I think this is a good project myself, this replacing this structure. I think there's some very talented, skilled professionals out there that would love taking this on. And I'll refer to Councillor Whitehead's comments there about people using it for all sorts of things. We had exactly the same problem with the bandstand in Ashbourne. Once it was replaced, nice and tidy, that seems to have all gone away. It seems to be brilliant now. So probably a bit of false CCTV or whatever, I think that could solve the problem. But I think it's a wonderful project. And is the budget, the sum allowed, the 40, is that still in the sort of pipeline? Is that still enough to do the project?
Through you, Chair, we'll need to look at the costings. That was the original budget, but that was originally put in probably 3 years ago now, and obviously costs have increased. But we feel that may increase slightly, but we'll need to have a look at that once we've got the specification agreed with the International Council, and once we know that specification, and then we can look to the cost. I mean, the big advantage is we have the materials, most of the materials, and we have a local contractor that will be able to do that work. So the missing bit really is getting that final specification, and that will determine the eventual cost.
Yeah, I'd have thought with the cost of living and the increase in wages, I'd have thought that to go quite a big sum. I'd have thought we're probably looking close on double, I'd have thought, but that's just my take on it. But no, I hope it succeeds. The other question is for Mike, basically. The Ashbourne Reborn project, the project 680, obviously we've had a completion certificate issued, but we've still got one or two outstanding issues, well, quite a few outstanding issues, and I take it that'll still going to be within the time frame of getting the remedial work completed, is it?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So obviously Giles Dan's leading on that project, but we're working with him on some of the snagging issues, and there are a number of live snagging issues at the moment that are going through the proper processes.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Slack.
We got contact. Right. I'm going to speak about what's not there in this one. About 18 months ago, I think there were a review into junior football pitches owned by the district council. I've never heard anything what happened with that review, Ash. You know, I think it was through your department, because we've a football pitch in my ward which is totally unplayable in the winter. It's the sea of mud and the lads can't play on it, and they finish up playing on the road in the winter. So this is not good. So, you know, this football pitch was first laid when the houses were just after the Second World War, and it's never had no attention over all the years from that. It's never had no attention, and it wants drainage put in underneath and relaying. The lads are interested in football. You watch the World Cup, and we've got to encourage people into these. But the villages do suffer that having not the same facilities, and this football pitch needs attention. It really does. So I don't know what's happening with this review, Ash.
Chair, if I can, the objective in the corporate plan, you have to forgive me because I can't remember off the top of my head what the date for completion was, but I don't actually think it's till August, September this year.
Right,
And it wasn't just a review of junior sports pitches, it was a review of parks, open spaces and playing surfaces. So it was quite a significant review of all our assets. And I know that we've had discussions about this relatively recently, and the position remains the same. I don't think that it's right that we look at each individual pitch in isolation. I think looking at the potential costs that could be involved, especially when you're talking about things like drainage on pitches, that could be significant costs across the whole of the district. I think we need to look at the project as a whole rather than individual pitches in isolation. That work, the audit has taken place. We are waiting for the final report to come through, but I am expecting it almost any time now. Once we've had a chance to digest it, we'll be bringing something to members, but that work needs costing, and that's part of that review, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, sir. Can I come back? Yeah, this pitch particularly has had no, same as Russ said, it's had no attention in all those years. The parish council's tried to do bits and bobs, but it needs drainage putting on. All it needs is trenching and drainage putting and resurfacing. Really, it's not a great big area. It's a junior football pitch, but it does take the lads off the road to play football. You know, we must encourage this, and by not doing it, we letting them down, aren't we? So. Please look at this issue for me. Thank you.
Chair, if I may just come back to give some context. Totally take your point, Councillor Slack. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I'm just trying to stress that we do need to look at it in the whole rather than in isolation. And just for context,
I don't know
some drainage works, whilst they may seem like a small task, recent drainage works that we had done at Ashbourne, and Ashbourne members will know this, were in excess of £30,000. That's so.
It's only a junior pitch, yeah. It's not a big pitch.
Well, it's still not insignificant amounts, and I think when we start and look at the number of pitches that we've got, and the likelihood of works that are needed across those, I think it's really important that we look at it as a whole.
Because to be fair, this pitch has never had no attention since the Second World War. So, I mean, that's a long time ago, isn't it? You know, there's nothing been spent on it. Thank you.
You make a good case, Councillor Slack. Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Roger. I can't remember the exact hierarchy of change that we have to bring to bear on a report. Most of the report is absolutely fine. I'm very happy to move all of it, but I believe Laura and Simon are considering amending something, and I'm wanting to add an additional recommendation. What order are we meant to do this in?
First of all, if you're...
Oh, am I on the wrong item?
You're on 9.
I'm on 9.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologise.
Well, we are on item 9.
I thought we were on that, yeah. Oh, right, they're on a different thing.
We're on 10.
Okay.
Phew. Right, in that case,
Hang on a second.
having...
Just before we move to that, are there any further questions? I see a couple of hands up at the back. So Councillor O'Brien, first of all.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 79, paragraphs 216 and 217. I'm absolutely delighted to see projects 747, 748 now feature in the capital programme. Can we have an assurance that there'll be an appropriate media release to let the 8 communities who are now programmed to get social housing at last provided, to let them know this is now going to happen, to demonstrate this council's absolute commitment to delivering its corporate priority for social housing, particularly in the national park communities. Could I have an assurance that that will be made known to the public rather than kept hidden away in the vaults of our minutes?
I'm getting some nods from colleagues to the left here, so I think you can be reassured about that. Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Flitter brought up with this about benefiting the community, basically. And whilst I'm fully supportive of the pipeline of housing in the Peak Park, have we got assurances that it will be to the benefit of people from the Derbyshire Dales and Nottingham City Housing aren't going to bring people in? You know, is it categoric that it will be for local people within the Dales? Otherwise, we're not really benefiting the Dales, are we? And our residents. So if anybody could answer that.
An interesting question. Who would like to field that from the team?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Chair. I think what Councillor Wayne is alluding to is the council's housing lettings policy through the home option scheme, which we clearly have. There has been discussion through the local plan committee in regard to that particular issue, and it's also under active consideration by the housing working group at the moment. So my understanding is, and Councillor Nash might correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that there will be a piece of work come through council in due course on that particular issue.
And hopefully the piece of work will make sure that it benefits the people in our communities.
Councillor
Can I,
Nash.
Chair? Yeah, we've just taken that on as a working group, as an activity. We've yet to look at the evidence, but it's basically aimed at tiers 3, 4 and 5, not the whole of Derbyshire Dales.
Thank you.
Councillor Flitter, did you have your hand up?
I did. Yes. I just wanted to ensure that Councillor Slack, you're not alone with abandoned football pitches, but you have to look at the usage and the conditions before you start spending money. What I wanted to comment on the shelter really. I mean, things have not changed since the 60s, well, the 50s, late 50s and 60s, because everybody seems to think that the youth of today is either vandalism or not acting appropriately. And I get a bit perturbed because it's not always the young ones. And my question was coming, where are we these days? We used to have something in planning called planning out antisocial behaviour and town centres and so forth, areas of concern. And I sort of point out that Matlock Town Council had a problem just down the road with their building. And because there were bushes and trees and it was rather concealed, then we were getting overnight sleepers, we were getting bad behaviour. But we planned out that garden so it was open and free for anybody. And it disappeared. But we went through a stage in planning where we had a particular policy of planning out antisocial behaviour. So is that not effective these days, or is that seen to be a thing of the past and forgotten?
I'm not sure I can answer your question in its entirety, Councillor Flitter, but there are certain things that we can do to reduce the chances of antisocial behaviour. And conversation that myself and Councillor Whitehead had today was about opening up particular areas, making them more visible from from the street, rather than having secluded areas or areas that are closed off. So there are things that we can do, but I also think there's another approach in terms of working with partners in the police and putting it on their radar, excuse the pun, to increase patrols. But also I think we need to look at the data in terms of antisocial behaviour, because I think sometimes there is a perception of antisocial behaviour when there are groups of younger people. They're not necessarily committing acts of antisocial behaviour. So I think we need to really understand what is happening. In terms of the shelter itself, we do know that because we have to clear up on a regular basis there. But in terms of other areas, I think it's taking a broader view of it.
Councillor Martin Beaufort.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I want to refer to Project 625, Bakewell Road, Matlock Development. I've been quite upset in the last couple of weeks that this project's cost over £1 million, and yet there doesn't seem to be any maintenance carried out, subsequent maintenance either by the contractor responsible for watering the planters or for other trees as well, either reinstating them, replacing them or whatever. And it's disappointing when so much money is spent on a project, on a new project, that passers by notice planters that haven't been watered, full of dead plants. Now, some have just been removed, but that is after quite a few representations on my part to officers. And it's unforgivable, really, that residents should see money spent on a project and then a lack of maintenance, either a maintenance liability on the part of the contractor, or it's the council, it's council staff itself, the clean and green staff that aren't carrying out regular maintenance on. And I know they've got problems in Hollies Park, and it's quite a watering liability at the moment. But if it's a new project that's cost that amount of money, I think resources should be allocated to that, because it's so important in our town centre that a project that's cost that amount of money doesn't look like it's being cared for. So I think we need to press that home on all our projects, that adequate maintenance is carried out subsequently, or a contractor is asked to, if it's a defects liability, then that's followed up and the contractor concerned is asked to do the necessary works. I know it's a problem at the moment with the drought situation, but some projects I think need it. And just to add to that, just every time we come into the town hall, there are two planters either side of this front entrance. They're full of dead plants. It doesn't look very satisfactory to residents who come in to pay bills, whatever, to notice that you couldn't be closer to a water supply, and yet those plants have not been watered at all.
Okay, that's a good question. Is that one of yours, Ash?
I will take it, Chair. I mean, I know that Councillor Burfoot has had several exchanges with Samantha regarding this, and whilst I do understand the point that you're making, I think it's been a long time since we've had any rain. And it's really challenging. We've got a clean and green team, as you all know, that cover a lot of miles around the district, and their works are not solely related to watering plants. They try to do it as much as they can. But if we divert them from what they should be doing elsewhere to watering plants, we are going to get complaints in other areas. They're doing the best that they can to maintain this, regularly seeing refilling bowsers and trying to water the plants. But as you all know in your gardens at home, unless you're doing it almost every day, we're going to struggle at this moment in time until we see some rain. They are doing their best, and they, I've spoken to Sam about this, that they'll continue to do as much as they can, but they do have other roles and responsibilities that they have to continue with.
Councillor Burfoot, do you want to come back on that?
I don't altogether agree, actually, because these are two or three planters, not very big, and it's a new project. If it had been there for some years, and the drought was a reason for it, but any new plants need watering on a regular basis, otherwise in any summer situation they're going to die, to be honest. It's not just the present drought, it's the summer season basically. And in my experience, I've always had to water my plants in my containers because of the summer, and not necessarily, I know we're having no rain, so there's no water collection feature. Perhaps that's something that could be investigate actually having a water butt in place to collect rainwater when it does rain, if it's a problem getting water supply to these sites. But I mean, we're not a million miles from headquarters, and it's a very prominent site, as is the town hall.
Points well made. I'm sure they'll be taken on board by the team. Thank you. No other questions then. Councillor Butler, over to you. Do you wish to propose?
Thank you very much. While addressing the correct item, I hope this time. Agenda item 9, I'd like to move it. I'd like to add a further recommendation. It's in the context of recommendation 4 and the 2 for shelter, and the fact that there are clear local concerns. And would you like me to read this out? Would that help you? I know everyone has a copy. I'm just wondering about for the
wider audience.
Posterity. Yes. Right. And I'll get to the Matlock Bath a bit at the end. Yeah. The council approves the sum of £44,000 already allocated in the capital programme to be used for the reinstatement of the Tuffer shelter at Lovers Walks, Matlock Bath, using the salvaged original Tuffer fabric wherever practicable. That in completing these works, council be mindful that reinstatement develop. Hang on, I'll try and doing this in English. That in completing these works, council be mindful that the reinstatement scheme developed addresses the long-standing safety and antisocial behaviour concerns associated with the former structure through appropriate design, sightlines, lighting and an agreed maintenance regime in consultation with Historic England, the Gardens Trust, Matlock Bath Parish Council, I missed that word, Bath, on the where I had it printed out, and the District Council Ward member. And if we did that, I would hope that we would be able to put some of the concerns mentioned earlier to bed.
Okay. Yes, you can be forgiven there. That's a seven-line sentence I think you were wrestling with there, but hopefully it encompasses what your feeling is, and indeed the feeling of a seconder. Do we have such a seconder, Councillor Bond?
Sorry, Chair, just a quick question before proceeding on this. Recommendation 4 relates to this item, and my question is this because this is a positive recommendation in relation to recommendation 4, is this to replace recommendation 4, or is it an additional recommendation? It looks like it's a replacement of recommendation 4 to me. Is that what's been suggested?
That's my understanding from the proposer. That's correct, isn't it?
I will take whatever works, but but nevertheless, yes. When I wrote it, I intended it to replace number 4, and I'm absolutely fine with that. If that suits other people, that suits me too.
Thank you, Chair. And just further before seconding, in 221, the suggestion, and in recommendation 4, the original one, the suggestion is that our if there was a desire not to rebuild, that would likely be refused, and that's what paragraph 2021 says. And so, to some extent, it feels like pressing forward with the application seems to be the only option to some extent, unless the bricks just sit there on a yard for the next 20 years. So I am happy at this stage to second that proposal. Thank you.
Good. Yes, I think that's encompassed in the new recommendation 4. Yeah. Okay. So we have a proposer and a seconder for all 7 items there, but number 4 has been changed to what you've got in front of you. Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on anything on this? Councillor Franks.
I'm a little concerned with that the estimate of 44,000 was 3 years ago, and that there would have been at least, you can add half of that on again, if not doubled it, as and this is very restrictive. and I don't think we'll be able to rebuild at that cost. I think we should somehow incorporate in the ability to extend that figure.
Okay, all right. I'm going to just refer to Karen for a top-up fund if necessary. Can you suggest one, please?
Well, can I suggest that we leave the amount as it is? If members are happy to agree in principle that officers proceed with the works, and then when Mike's had a chance to get the cost estimates, we can use the usual process to come back to council and request an additional amount if that's necessary.
That satisfying. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. So I presume we're in debate now, aren't we? So first of all, I wanted to thank Councillor Buttle because I've been working on this sort of recommendation with him this week, and I think he's shaped it quite nicely. I know with some support of other colleagues as well. So I really appreciate that. But I think I have to put on the record that I do find it a crazy world that we can rebuild heritage. So if Big Ben or Elizabeth Tower got knocked down today and we proposed rebuilding it, it wouldn't be the same building. It would be a new building, and this will be a new shelter. So I'm quite happy with the proposal, because I think if we can look at the design of it and make it actually work with the environment that it's in to try and mitigate some of the issues, then that seems a happy compromise. But it does worry me that costs could escalate on basically something virtually no one in the community want. All the people who are pushing for this live outside the community. And it seems like we're being forced to go down a road of rebuilding a shelter that no one really liked, kind of wasn't used appropriately. And as we know, it was coming to the end of its operational life anyway. And I think the thing that upsets me the most is that shelter's gone. But when I walk around Lovers Walk, I see our other wonderful shelters, one of them boarded up, other shelters in the gardens with kind of framing all around them because we're not doing the maintenance to keep them kind of up, fit for purpose. And yet we're going to spend £44,000 trying to rebuild some heritage, and possibly £100,000, when actually all the other buildings in the gardens in Lovers Walk would be used. So the shelter where people used to sit in, which is now boarded up, used to be regularly used, and it'd be wonderful to see that come back online. But that's not on the cards at the moment. So I would really like us seeing, not just in Matlock Bath, but across the whole of our estate, understanding the condition that our facilities are in, and actually what's our plan to start fixing it. Because I look at the bandstand across on Lovers Walk, and it's absolutely fallen to bits, and I can see nothing happening to make it good. I can look at Jubilee Bridge, which we invested an awful lot of money in just a few years ago, and already it needs cleaning, it needs maintenance. That's not happened. So while I understand the situation we're in, it does leave me wondering, what are we going to do with all our other prized assets, both in Matlock Bath and right across our district?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Slack, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do agree with Councillor Whitehead. I think all this money could be better spent elsewhere. I mean, there's lots and lots of projects crying out for money which are worthwhile for the community. I don't think this money is really warranted to spend all this money on this issue. Really, it'd be far, far better spending it on the community where people need things, not heritage. It's not heritage. It's same as it's gone. It's not heritage anymore. It's gone, and we're trying to rebuild heritage, and we can't do that because heritage is what's from before. So we should really be honest with ourselves and say that's gone. Let's spend the money somewhere else. And I think it's wrong to do this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wayne.
Yes, having heard Councillor Whitehead, and let's face it, it isn't going to be cheaper than £44,000. It's going to be significantly more than £44,000. And listening to how it was abused previously, I can't support something that we just throwing money like that when there are other more beneficial things that would get the use. I just won't be able to support it, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean that sounds like it may be a request for a separate vote on item 4, even the amended one from yourself. Is that right?
Makes sense.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
It does. I mean, if you were to put item 4 separately, you know, everything else, yes. The other 6, is it? The other 6, I'm with, but just that one, I can't. I'm not going to be able to support that. Thank you.
Okay, that would need a seconder if that was going forward. Councillor Ripton.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify, given 221 refers to this in essence being something we must do, I mean, it's important to understand costs, but I guess there is a cost to not doing it in that we may well incur additional planning, legal, other costs. So is that correct? And does anybody know what the cost of that might be? So we are comparing apples with apples here.
Okay, it's a good question again. So in the interests of clarity, I'm just going to ask the officers if they have a comment on that point.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I mean, I think the situation is that it's a listed building, so we would have to apply to regularise the position if we didn't replace it. And the advice that we've had, the pre-application advice, is that that would not find favour, so it's unlikely to be approved. So where would that leave us if the decision was not to replace it? We would apply for listed building consent. That may be determined against us, so we would then be in breach of listed building consent for one of our assets. So I think there's the merits or otherwise of the building itself, and I understand all of that and the concerns about it, but the sort of it's protected by being listed, not by us, but you know, it's been listed for a number of years, and that is the legislation that we need to abide by. You know, we might be able to spend the money. There's lots of other things we could equally or better possibly spend the money on, but we have to comply with that legislation. So I suppose to answer the question, ultimately we might have to be compelled to rebuild it at a later date when costs may be even higher. Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mark's just really alluded to what I was going to say, really. I mean, this is not just a building, it's a grade 2 star listed building, which in my opinion we should be looking after our heritage and our assets, heritage assets basically, and like the other structures we should be looking after them. They're probably grade 2 as well, and you know, listed as well. So I agree, it should be a programme that we look at all of these buildings and get them back to something like, and you can replace old with new, and you can make it look old. You know, I've been in the building trade all my life, and we've been doing that all my life on listed buildings and heritage stuff. So it is doable. So I think we ought to look after our grade 2 star assets that are listed.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I think we should listen carefully to what Councillor Whitehead has said. I think he speaks with a lot of local knowledge and experience, and I think we'd be unwise to counter the points he's made. 2 key points he's made to me are that we're taking a very piecemeal approach here. As Councillor Whitehead said, we should have a programme. It's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, rebuilding one particular shelter. Now, and we're doing it because we've had a letter from an organisation requesting that we do it. We've heard from Mike that advice has been obtained that we might not be successful in obtaining listed building consent. We haven't seen that advice as members. We're not privy to that advice. We've seen one letter from an organisation asking us to rebuild the shelter, we've not seen, as I said, why haven't we seen the rest of the advice? If we've had advice about what our position should be, why haven't we seen the full range of advice? Why haven't we seen the advice we've received from whoever, English Heritage or whatever they are now, about the position? I would be very surprised. So I would be surprised if I would be surprised that consent would be refused, given the circumstances. I'm not convinced that retrospective consent for the demolition would not be granted. And as I said, given what Councillor Whitehead has said, I'm surprised we aren't testing that before we embark on something which in the long term might prove to be not a very sensible investment. So on two counts, I think we should listen to what Councillor Whitehead says.
Thank you for that contribution. I mean, can I test whether there is further evidence?
Can I just come in just for a second?
Yes, briefly.
Bit of information. I mean, this letter from this organisation offering help is not the only confirmation that we've had that there is a need to restore the shelter. In fact, a local conservationist who is greatly revered in this area, Barry Joyce, wrote to me by email asking me why this council had not taken the appropriate action before, and sort of inferred that if we did not act in a proper way under the heritage, then we would be charged with failure of our duty. And Barry is a very revered local person that has been on conservation for many, many, many years. And I took his view very seriously that we should investigate.
Okay, before we just come to Councillor Whitehead, are there any other comments, Mike, that you'd like to make about that?
Just one, if I may, Chair. With regard to the advice from our Design and Conservation Officer, that was back in 2021 when this originally came up, and that was formed part of the rationale for this originally going into capital programme at that time. So that's not a new thing. That's something that was in place, and we've been working to that advice, which is why it was originally in capital programme. Obviously, since it's been removed or reallocated to something else, we've not been doing any further work on that. But that remains the view of the current Design and Conservation Officer. So we're still, hence why I've mentioned that in this report. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead.
So I've just while we've been chatting, I thought I'd look up the guidance because I've not really looked at it before, because we keep talking about guidance and what people recommend. So the guidance is, if the shelter, even if it's grade list 2 listed, was destroyed accidentally, there is no automatic requirement to rebuild it. However, the local authority will expect an assessment of the damage, a heritage statement, and a decision on whether reconstruction, partial reinstatement, or recording and accepting the loss is the right conservation outcome. Rebuilding is possible, but only if evidence exists to do it accurately and if the council agrees. So I think we're being wrongly advised on this. And so I think we probably should maybe ask for this to be removed from the agenda tonight, ask Mike to go and do some additional work on it so we have the full legal guidance, national guidance, not just someone who's into conservation who sends us a letter. And let's get the right information so councillors, the professionals in the room, can make the right decision. And if that's put the shelter back, that's absolutely fine. I'll live with that. But I'm not going to be sort of having things said in council, which I've already got the evidence in front of me. That's not right. So I don't know how we want to proceed on this.
Well, we can certainly put forward, or you can put forward, a proposal that that item is removed full stop from the list of recommendations, and we don't have a replacement at the moment. That would allow officers time to carry out the further investigations that you're talking about. I think that's a course of action we could take.
So I'm happy to recommend that, and for it to be brought back to next council with that set out for us.
Councillor Slack? Okay, so we've got a proposal to do just that. Yes, Councillor Wanton.
Chair, this rebuild project is already in the system with the money allocated potentially to it. I don't disagree that other things should be put as a capital project for repair, the bandstand, shelters, etc., which are supported. But I don't know what guarantees there are that any monies not spent on the tougher building can be put to that project. So I'm for going ahead with the restoring the building as it is, and then perhaps look further down the line at finding monies for a further project for repairing the bandstand, etc. Well, we don't know the cost of that yet, do we? That's going to come back.
Okay, let's just control the meeting a little bit more. So we've got an amendment to the proposal, first of all, and that amendment which is proposed and seconded is to remove item 4. So that's what we're speaking about. Is there anyone else wants to speak about that before we move to a vote? Councillor Buttle, you do.
I do want to recommend, or do want to make a comment on that, because that was my original thing, wasn't it? I removed 4 and put a new 4 in. So if you took my 4 out, we would be back where we are, where the council is going to determine its position. So, like, essentially what Nick's saying is take my suggestion out and leave it as it is. You know, like the whole thing's just, we're spiralling down a rabbit hole again.
All right. Okay. Well, it's a very interesting rabbit hole. We've got a proposal to remove item 4. Both item 4s. Can we see a show of hands in favour of removing item 4 and not replacing it?
Sorry.
Full recommendation would be to remove item 4.
Yes.
Bring back to next full council.
Yes.
A full report on costing and the heritage position in terms of status of what we have to rebuild and don't.
All right. Have we got that as a form of words? Okay. So we have an additional proposal there for that to come back for full costing and report at the next meeting. Councillor Bond.
Yes, Chair. I think from what I've heard, and Chamber is live. Let's believe it's true, and we have open minds on this. I think that would be a most sensible process to go forward with. I know I seconded that proposal. I thought we were being asked to make a decision based upon sound evidence. It's clear that there is further debate to be had and further information to be found out. I think it would be sensible to follow up. We're not saying it's not going to be done. We're not saying it is going to be done. We're saying we're going to seek the way in which we should make our decision, and to have that decision based on sound evidence and practice and policy. So I would certainly go with Councillor Whitehead's recommendations. I'm happy to second it, actually, Chair. Even though I've seconded one before. I could make a regular practice of seconding things, Chair, if that would be appropriate, but I certainly would.
Councillor Lees.
We're all getting confused now.
Yeah.
Is it not still coming back when Mike's got the final costs anyway? So it'll still be up for discussion at a later date anyway.
There's no escaping the clutches of the two for rock shelter, I'm afraid. So yeah, we're going to see it again.
So why shouldn't we go ahead with what's on the?
First of all, I think we need.
Sorry, I'm.
No, you're okay.
Come back anyway.
We need to have the proposer and the second that's been put forward withdrawing their original motion. I think, if that's okay. I've been told it will only come back if the costs are more than 44,000. I mean, I think that's highly likely from what we've heard. But yeah. Sorry, did somebody have their hand up? All right. I think so. We're in a position now where I'm looking at the proposer and seconder of these various amendments to say they're going to withdraw them in favour of one which Councillor Whitehead, you just put forward, which was to ask officers to bring back to council a future report with costings on that. That's replacing item 4, recommendation 4. Okay. Councillor Butler.
Absolutely not. I'm happy with this.
You happy with that?
Yeah, but I need a seconder. So if I've not got a seconder, then
Sorry,
we
what
go
are you
back
happy
to
with?
the first 6.
So basically, the original motion's been moved and seconded.
Yeah.
And if councillor,
Yeah.
has changed his mind. So we need to vote
I
on this
am.
amendment. See if the amendment is best or counted.
Yeah,
This,
they both work.
yes.
Yeah, that's what's on the table at the moment. So
Right.
we need to vote on this amendment.
Okay, right. Okay, for clarity, we're voting on the amendment, which is, it's the replacement of 4. Yeah. And a replacement which says officers are going to be asked to bring back to council a future evaluation with costs on that project. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a proposer for that, haven't we, in the shape of yourself, Councillor Whitehead?
Councillor Slack seconded.
Councillor Slack seconding. Can we see all those in favour? Please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3.
In favour of the replacement of recommendation 4 with the request to officers to, I can't believe I'm reading this out when we're voting, to bring that item back to council for future evaluation with costs and an assessment of heritage.
That's 15-4.
15-4. Those against? Any abstentions?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 abstentions.
8 abstentions. That's clearly carried. So, thank you, members. We've got the recommendations as they now are then. So that's the 7 in front of you, but 4 has been amended to that which you've just voted on. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this fascinating matter? No. I think we should move straight to the vote then. Can we have all those in? Councillor Wayne? You're going to propose to? Yes. Okay. Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Ripton. All those in favour of the amended recommendations? I think that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Item 10. So this is the provisional revenue outturn for 25-26. Karen, I think you're fielding this one again, aren't you?
Thank you, Chair. So this report shows the provisional revenue account outturn of the council's spending for the year ending 31st of March 2026. As with the previous report, the outturn is provisional because it's not yet been audited. The report shows that the provisional outturn on the revenue account for 25-26 was an underspending of £2.42 million. I think it is. Sorry, technology glitch. Was an underspending of £2.24 million. Most of the surplus is one-off rather than recurring items, but around £900,000 of the surplus does relate to ongoing variances, either savings in expenditure or additional income. And when we set the budget in March and the updated medium-term financial plan, we've already taken account of that 900,000 of the £2.24 million. The main reasons for the underspending are summarised in the table at paragraph 1.2 of the report, with further information given in paragraphs 1.3 to 119 and in Appendix 3. As explained in the report, the reasons for a lot of the variances were outside the council's control. They were affected by things like changes in the economy, interest rates being higher than we expected, changes in service use, higher income, and so on. So to balance the council's accounts, it's necessary to decide what to do with 2.24 million net underspend. And paragraph 2.4 of the report sets out recommended transfers to reserves. The first two of those have already been considered at earlier council meetings, but at that time we said we wouldn't actually make the transfers till after the year end. So the first one of those is £424,000 to a committed expenditure reserve, effectively to help balance the budget shortfall for 27-28. And the second is £797,000 and 81 to a financial sustainability reserve for future funding pressures already identified in the medium-term financial plan. That leaves £1,021,871 that we recommend is put into a new reserve for local government reorganisation implementation. So we know the decision's been made now that LGR will be happening subject to the legislation being laid, and it makes sense to set aside some of this underspend for that purpose. So the implementation reserve would provide a source of funding for the council to meet its share of LGR implementation costs, so they could cover things like exit costs, consultancy, software costs, because it might be necessary to run two systems for part of the time as we bring in new processes. So these costs will be incurred by all of the Derbyshire authorities in advance of the creation of the new councils, so from now really until March 28. And other district councils and borough councils across the region have already begun to set aside funds, so it's not only us thinking about this. Erewash Borough Council have set aside £2 million. Bolsover District Council have set aside £900,000. The government, in their announcement, did award the new some new money. They awarded £900,000 to each new council area, but the costs are going to be way in excess of that. The bid that we that the districts and boroughs took to MHCLG last year in November indicated that implementation costs at that stage were estimated to cost £65 million. So over the coming months, Section 151 officers will be working together to update those estimates, refine them, and to recommend some sort of cost sharing allocation that gives a fair and reasonable share to the different sizes of councils within the new councils. So when that's known, I'll report back to members. But at the current time, I expect the cost to be for Derbyshire Dales to be in excess of £1 million, which is why I'm recommending this transfer. The table in paragraph 2.5 of the report provides a summary of reserve balances, assuming that members approve the transferred reserves, the recommended transfers. So you can see the other reserves that we've got for other purposes in Appendix 2. It's important to note that a lot of the reserves and provisions are for specific purposes and they're not necessarily available for general use. But I would also like to point out that it's possible for members to approve transfers between reserves at future council meetings should circumstances change in future. If we find there are new needs, we can make changes in future. So I'm asking members to approve the 3 recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I've got questions from Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for all the sort of advice and briefings that you've given the Conservative group in the past. It's very much appreciated. The amount spent on local government reorganisation, it makes my heart sink when, I mean, we could all go through lots of projects that we've got in our communities, you know, as Councillor Slacks alluded to tonight. Could I just make a plea? This is probably not the correct time, and we're having a bit of dialogue. Notwithstanding the dialogue that's going on with Ash and Vicky, could I make a plea that in the future we could look at the funding of an enforcement officer for the public space protection order in relation to fires? I know Councillor Lee's, with his experience of the fire service, it's a very worrying time, particularly for those communities at Birchover and Stanton in Peak. So I don't know when we could do that, but I'd like that to be considered. Thank you.
Okay, that's a question. Are we able to field that at the moment, or is that one for consideration later? Yeah,
Chair, I think it's for consideration rather than an off the cuff comment.
Okay. Councillor Maelstrom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a question. I entirely agree with Councillor Hobson, by the way, in terms of the need for a fire officer, but that perhaps is something that I don't know if it needs to go through GNR first, perhaps. But I would certainly support that. My question is about the LGR implementation reserve and why we're putting such a massive amount now into that reserve. 10 days ago, Paul Wilson circulated a report by the chair of the Derbyshire Chief Executive's LGR group, which was a report to the Derbyshire Strategic Leadership Board. And in that report, which I think went to everybody, it said Section 151 officers have considered the potential need for an implementation reserve, but have concluded that decisions on the timing, scale and cost sharing methodology should follow the ministerial decision. Appreciate we've had that in the interim, and the completion of a fully costed resource plan. This approach avoids committing councils prematurely before the scope, funding requirements and MHCLG, not entirely sure what that is, funding positions are clearer. So my question is, were you one of the Section 151 officers who agreed that it was premature? And if not, why not? Why do you take a different view?
I think I was aware of that recommendation, and I did agree with it. I think there's a distinction needs to be made between setting money aside in a reserve that might be used in future should the need arise, and actually approving a budget to be spent. So I probably should have made it clear that when we know the outcome of the costings, I said I would bring a future report to council, but the purpose of that report would be to seek approval to spend that budget on the implementation costs. So if you like, members, at the moment we're just saying it's good prudent advice to keep aside some of this underspending for something that might come in the future. You'll get the chance to make another decision in the future when we know the outcome of that exercise on the cost sharing, and hopefully at that stage the decision will be easier because we've got this money set aside to finance it. Is that clear?
It is, but the reports I've just quoted from isn't talking about a budget. It's talking about an implementation reserve, which is exactly what we're talking about setting up. So if the other Derbyshire councils, chief executives in this report, the LGR group, decided it was premature to fix reserves, even let alone budgets, why are we putting this much? I mean, it's a colossal amount now. Why are we committing this much?
I think the position we're in is that we've got a significant underspend, so we've got an opportunity to do it now. If members decide not to put that in the reserve now and to put it somewhere else, you could put it in the general reserve. We could make the decision later to allocate it to LGR if that's what members would prefer.
Thank you. I think Paul would like to come in on this.
Yeah, just to add a little more clarity to that Chair. Certainly, Karen's absolutely right that other authorities in Derbyshire have made provision, but they made that provision when they set their budgets back in March, because financially they were in a position to make that decision at that time. We clearly weren't in that situation, because whilst we did predict an underspend for the reasons that Karen's laid out, we weren't clear exactly what level of underspend we would get. We now know that, subject to the accounts being audited. And given the financial changes that we made when we set the budget, we don't anticipate that in the financial year 26-27, we will see anything like the same level of underspend that we've seen in the past few years. Because the way that we've budgeted this year, we have made a number of assumptions based upon those historical underspends. So the point being that we have an opportunity now to make some provision for costs that we know we are going to incur in the very, very near future. Things are moving at a real pace in terms of commissioning work and having to make decisions on moving forward now that we have the decision from the Secretary of State. And in very quick time, I anticipate that we will be coming back to Council requesting that these reserves be released. So it's basically taking the opportunity now to seek members' approval to set aside the reserve. Otherwise, when we do come back with those requests in the not too distant future, you're going to have to make a decision then as to how you're going to pay for it. But the costs incurred by this authority and every authority will be significantly in excess of £1 million. The £1 million will not go close to what we're looking at.
Thank you. So we've got questions, I think, Councillor Ripton.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding, obviously, that the LGR project will need funding, I guess the business of local government goes on. And one of the things, I guess it's come out tonight actually in the conversation, is that there are still lots of community initiatives that need attention, whether that's infrastructure projects, items that help improve the environment in which our communities live. And certainly my colleagues in the Labour group, we've been pushing hard the idea of this regeneration project. And I know officers are bringing a paper to that effect, I think next month or in September. So one of the things we talked about earlier this week was in our budget working group was still providing some money for the LGR reserve, a reduced amount, say £750,000, but seeding that community regeneration fund, if you like, with some initial capital, so that when the officer paper came through, there was a sum. Now, clearly, we've heard tonight there is lots we could do, so there's clearly a need. The question I've got for you, Karen, is about process. In that, I understand we can't create a community reserve fund on the hoof tonight, but what I don't want to do is see that money go into the LGR pot and it never ever comes out again. So can you just clarify that we have got the ability to access funds from any of these reserves when the paper comes forward for community regeneration, so that we can then appraise how much we want to take from these reserves and put into that regeneration fund?
Well, you could actually set aside money in a reserve tonight, but I wouldn't recommend that because you haven't seen the paper. Members are not aware of what they'd be setting aside the funds for. So while you could technically do it, I wouldn't recommend it. In terms of looking at the reserves, yes, if so long as council approves it, you can move amounts between reserves at any time. Clearly, as your section 151 officer, I would advise that you look at the purpose of the reserve to make sure that the amounts in there are still needed. And we do go through that process every time we set the budget, in particular. So there might be some amounts that are in reserves that are not currently earmarked for use in the revenue budget or capital programme. So certainly that's the type of thing that we do, and we would do if a paper was to be brought on a community regeneration initiative.
Does that help? Councillor Nash, I think you had a question as well. Yes, I know.
I've got 3 questions if I can, Chair. Paul's alluded that £1 million is not going to be enough for the total cost of LGR. So what happens if we don't have the money in a reserve, and what state are the other councils in? Are we confident they can meet their liabilities? I'll come back to the other 2 questions afterwards.
Okay, we'll deal with that one first, shall we?
Paul. Yes, thank you, Chair. So when the case for change submission was formulated, which council considered back in November, at that time there was financial modelling undertaken for the cost of setting up 2 new unitaries, as was the district and borough proposal. As to which option we ultimately went for, it didn't make an awful lot of difference in terms of the costs. So at that particular time, that modelling indicated that the costs of implementation would be £65.4 million. In 27-28, the implementation costs were £15.1 million, and then progressively they increased to 19.8, 18.2, 10.3. Now, as Karen has stipulated, government has indicated that we'll receive £900,000 funding per new unitary, so 1.8 million will be coming to Derbyshire to meet a 65.4 million cost, which actually will have increased since that submission. There will be a structural changes order that's published, and you will be legally bound to meet the costs of implementing LGR, because government has said there's no additional funding. So somehow those costs do have to be met by the collective reserves. Now, when that case for change was submitted, there was sufficient reserves within the 10 authorities to meet the costs. That situation will have changed, and we don't yet know what the updated position is in terms of that work. That is something which will be undertaken in the next few months. But just looking at those case for change numbers, I think it gives an indication of the type of money that will need to be found across all authorities.
Well, I'm just really interested in that, Paul, because aren't the county council 4 million in deficit at the moment? Isn't that what they reported at the end of last financial year?
Well, the county council still have reserves. They just don't have reserves of the extent that they used to have, but they still have reserves.
Right. I didn't think you answered Andy's point, which was what happens if you don't have that money? How does it get them paid for? Does it come out of the
Well, I mean, all I can say is what government have said, in that you will have to find the money. So I assume that in the course of implementation, that will result in changes to service delivery in order to fund LGR. Because clearly you can't continue to fund services at their current level, run down your reserves such that you've got no reserves left to actually meet the costs. But government has indicated that there's no further money. They won't propose to step in. So effectively you've been in a situation whereby you have a council that can't meet its future liabilities, which legally it will be bound to meet.
Very interesting. Councillor Nash, I think you're in the middle of your questions. Do you want to carry on, please?
I'm quite happy to come back to mine if you want to continue this. I think what Paul's saying now is, well, we won't be here in 2 years' time, so it won't be our problem. It'll be the new unitary authority's problem. But what you're saying is we're now committed to our share of a £65 million regeneration or change programme that we have absolutely no control over.
Effectively, when the structural changes order is issued, which will be around February, March of next year, you will be legally required to contribute towards the establishment of those new unitary authorities. The precise sharing arrangement of those costs is clearly something which would need to be worked through amongst the authorities, but you will be legally bound to meet the costs.
So I go back to my original question, what happens if us and other authorities can't? Because it won't be equally split, but let's say it is. We're talking about over £6 million we have to find. I know the county will probably take a larger share.
That's a third of that, don't you?
Yeah. We won't be able to run, if we've got to find that kind of money in 1 year. I know you said it's spread over a number of years. How are we going to do that? And I'd like someone to come back with a plan that shows me this is actually deliverable and achievable.
Well, as the government already knows the reserves that all of the councils have, because we have to declare that every single year. So they know what we've got in totality in terms of usable reserves. Whilst some of them are allocated to particular projects, they are still usable. So the government will know that at this moment in time, or if we go back to when the case for change document was submitted, there were sufficient reserves to pay for LGR. So what will happen is when you receive the structural changes order, very quickly after that, you will get something called a Section 24 direction, which basically mandates you to cooperate with the new shadow authority that will be established after the election, and it will be the shadow authority's responsibility to set the budget. But the mandation will come in terms of limitations on expenditure that you can incur or we can incur as Derbyshire Dales, and also the distribution and allocation of reserves at that point to meet your LGR obligations. So the government basically will assume that sufficient reserves already exist, and the controls will effectively prevent the utilisation of those reserves unless there is agreement with that shadow authority once formed.
Does that answer your questions for now? Yes? Okay. That bombshell, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I should have saved it to last, but it was carrying on from the last two.
Mine is related to.
So I've got a sea of hands here, I think.
Yeah, I keep my next one really simple. I don't understand what 211 is saying. And is the 1.4 million at the end the total deficit? And if so, what's our share of it? Sorry, Karen, I normally I'd give you an opportunity to have an answer for this.
So 211 is talking about the business rates pool. So that's an arrangement across the Derbyshire authorities where we were allowed to, ineffectively, to retain part of the levy that would normally have gone to government and to share it amongst ourselves. So some of that levy came back directly as and effectively helped balance our budget, and some was sort of top slice to be used for regeneration type projects. So what it's saying in 211 is that it's telling you about our share of the business rates income. So we have to collect all the business rates income, but we don't retain it all. So we pass a lot back to the government. So it's explaining that. So it's saying that effectively there was a deficit of £1.435 million on the business rates collection fund for 25-26, and that's essentially because our estimates for that were out of kilter with the actual results. So I've not looked at the exact reasons, but it could be things like higher levels of write-offs. It could be higher levels of discounts and reliefs being given. There were more properties entitled to reliefs than we'd initially thought. So the 1.43 million is the total that's shared across.
So that's not the total that impacts on us. Ours is a
The impact on us is less. It is very complicated technically because that deficit then forms part of the. It's not charged to the relative bodies, the councils, the fire authority, the police, and so on. In the year in which it relates to, like almost everything else is, there are special rules for the collection fund. So the deficit is actually taken into account when we net set the council tax. So that deficit relating to 25-26 will be reflected when we make the decision on the council tax level for 27-28. It is complicated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perhaps another time you can explain it to me, because I kind of followed it, but not exactly.
All right. Thank you. Now, Councillor Butler, you had your hand up, certainly.
Thank you, Roger. So we all work within the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government, don't we? They are the people who are managing local government reorganisation for us, but they've also thrown their hat in the ring for housing. Now, if we want to prioritise one of those over the other, I would suggest we take a wodge of the local government reorganisation money and put it in our housing reserve, because they're going to find it harder to take that off us because we want to actually build housing and so do they. And so in that case, I'd really like us to do that. So they are tempted to give us a little bit more money to move things along. I'm just saying that to all councillors, as it were.
Is that a question, though?
Oh, was I meant to be asking a question? Yes, I was, wasn't I? I apologise. I do apologise. Can I do that? Yes. Can I do that?
Yes. Sorry, is that is there a question mark at the end of that sentence?
The question is, can we move money from LGR fund to the housing fund, and are we likely to be told to take it out of there to cover local government reorganisation?
Well, that's the type of issue that we'll need to address when we know the magnitude of the figure that we need to put aside for LGR. If it is significantly in excess of £1 million, then we'll need to look at the balances in other reserves to see if they can be moved over, which might also include the general reserve.
Thank you, Karen. So in that case, it's really down to the ministry, isn't it, to decide which they're going to prioritise, paying for local government, making us pay for it, or meeting their housing targets. Thanks.
The government have made clear that apart from this 900,000 for each new council, that they're not going to give us any more.
I won't be trusting the government.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions, one for Paul really, and then probably one for Karen. So I've just noted what Paul had said there, and I suppose what he said to me was probably a little bit similar to Councillor Buttle in terms of we shouldn't put our money in reserves at all, really, should we? Because if they're in a reserve, then they're fair game to be grabbed hold of. And so we should be allocating it to projects so we can spend the money. But my question to Paul is, so if they would consider all of our reserves, no matter, because you said the totality, does that mean we could be in a circumstance where we've built up reserves all over the place in our budgets and we have that money taken away from us, but other councils don't run as high reserves as us? So then Derbyshire Dales council taxpayers will then be offsetting the costs of LGR for all the other districts in the county. Is that what, could that happen, is basically my question, Paul.
If I can answer that slightly back to front. So when the case for change document was submitted, the financial modelling that I referred to earlier, when that was undertaken, that indicated that there was estimated to be at 31st of March 2028 across all councils £90 million of available reserves. So if you take those implementation costs that were estimated at 65.4 million, the case put forward was that there is adequate reserves to meet the costs of implementing LGR. Okay.
24 million demands.
Sorry?
Haven't we got, isn't our reserve, what's our reserve position overall? 24 million.
Well, it's in the paper that Karen's done. I've not got that figure in front of me at the minute, but the reserves are indicated in terms of
all of our reserves into that total amount, the 90 million. All of our reserves are in that 90 million.
no.
Or a portion of the head population.
It's available reserves. So what we've got, clearly we've got a number of reserves that we've set aside for particular projects. Okay. Outside of that, there will be uncommitted resources that every single council has. We've got the general reserve, for example, that is there for emergency expenditure, if you like. But the estimate of £90 million at March 28, that was taken as a figure to demonstrate that the costs of LGR could be met. Now, clearly, every council in Derbyshire is going to want to implement all of their projects in their capital programmes and their corporate plans before the councils cease to exist. Everybody's doing that, and that's a position which is commonly understood. But what the government will say is that you also have a financial obligation to make sure that those two new authorities that will be created are capable of still meeting the financial obligations for service delivery to service our communities. So whilst they are not saying that you've got to put all of your money from your current reserves into LGR and pay for it that way, what they have said is you need to be proportionate, you need to be balanced in terms of the financial decisions that you make. And there will come a point whereby progressively more and more control will be exercised. So you start to lose autonomy in the decision making, because the shadow authority will be with us in May of 27, and they will start the preparations and the budget preparation for the new authority. So it's not the case that all the reserves that we have got to go for LGR, but you do need to make some provision somehow. And how you make that provision is entirely up to you. What we're saying in this report is there is an opportunity now, which we didn't have when we set the budget. Every other authority did have that opportunity, but because we was taking money out of reserves to balance the budget for 26-27, we didn't have that luxury. Now we have it because we've got a demonstrated underspend. You might not have that same opportunity at the end of this current financial year. That's the point we're trying to make.
No, I completely understand that point. I suppose I still don't think I heard that from a Derbyshire Dales taxpayer point of view. Can we categorically say that we won't be disproportionately affected as a council? So we won't get to a position as we go into shadow year, as we lose control, that they say, oh, well, Derbyshire Dales has got 15-20 million pounds of reserve. That's now the new authority's money, which can technically be spent anywhere in that new local authority, not just in the Derbyshire Dales. So I seem to think there's a duty on us as Derbyshire Dales district councillors to make sure that we've spent that money on our community the best way possible before LGR happens. Because I didn't hear you discount that as a risk. So that means to me, it must be a risk that we will disproportionately be impacted from our reserves.
I didn't discount it because I honestly don't know what the reserve position is in respect of every other authority. We may have less reserves than other authorities. If I was to hazard a guess, I would say that's the case, because historically we've had much poorer local government settlements than everybody else. So I'd be very surprised if we've got more reserves than most other authorities, but I don't know what their levels of reserves are. And I don't know yet how the disaggregation of implementation costs will be applied, because we've not got to that point. All we're saying is making some provision now is better than having no provision, because the costs are coming down the line and they will come very quickly.
Very interesting. Okay, now, Councillor Ripton, did you have your hand up with another question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Paul, I just wanted to seek some clarity on the 65 million, if you could. It was the planning assumption that the 65 million of cost would be met solely from reserves, or is the case for change effectively saying there is a 65 million pound package of work, but for example, 30 million pound of officer time is a sunk cost anyway? If we choose to devote it to this program, then actually the real cash cost is only 35 million. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's a particular table, if you wanted to look at it at a later date, it's on page 56 of the Case for Change document. And the £65 million is made up from staff exit costs, staff training and development, transition support costs, communications and cultural change, process alignment, systems and IT integration, building and facilities changes. There's a contingency in there, and then there's one-off disaggregation costs. So the chief finance officers worked through everybody's budgets and came up with this modelling based upon the best information they had at that particular point in time. What effectively this is saying is that, as per the original letter that we got from the Secretary of State when LGR was first floated, they were very clear from the outset that the costs had to be met from existing budgets. The transition money which is going to come, the £900,000 per new unitary authority, that was a later announcement, but there's no indication that there will be any more money beyond that. So the very clear instruction that we're being given at the moment is that you need to meet it from your existing resources, however they are compiled.
Thank you. I think that's clarified, because I didn't want to think, and I didn't want members to think, that there is effectively £65 million of new money that had to be found to fund this programme. Effectively, what we're saying is, whether it's by repurposing existing officer time, repurposing training budgets, IT budgets, the sum of 65 million will be consumed in delivering this project. And it may be that actually only reserves funds a small component of that, and or it may be that asset disposals and other things fund that. So I guess the point is, we should absolutely be providing something for this potential headache. But equally, we can, I think, as a council, choose whether it's housing, whether it's community regen, to continue to put money into funds that we can continue to deploy as necessary. And then as this develops, we will get a better grip on both the costs and the...
Sounds like we're heading into debate territory here, but we've got a couple more questions, I think, probably. Councillor Slack, first of all, and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, what dates are the very important in this complex, aren't they? Well, have we got to act before Christmas, mainly on a lot of dates when we've got to make the decisions? And can we learn from other authorities that have gone through this before, how they've coped with it, leading up to unitary authorities? Can we learn from other authorities and set us, plan out in that respect? Two questions, Paul.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, there is a lot of shared knowledge taking place at the moment. I've lost count of the number of webinars and sessions that we've been on collectively as officers. So there is a lot of that taking place. We're getting a lot of support from the Local Government Association, and MHCLG themselves are providing a lot of advice and support. So there's no shortage there. But in terms of the critical dates, the key ones really are when the structural changes order is published. We will get a draft of that in the autumn of this year. It then needs to go through a parliamentary approval process, and we're told that it should clear that process by February or March of next year. Then we have the elections in May, and then progressively from then onwards, you will have a joint committee set up of the new Shadow Authority, and their sole responsibility is prepare for the new councils in April of 28. So really the first key date, if you like, is February, March of 27.
Obviously, we won't be setting a council tax. Obviously, the unitary authority won't it next year. We shan't set a council tax again, shall we?
Well, we will set a budget for 27-28, but Derbyshire Dales won't set its own budget for 28-29 if the current LGR timetable continues. However, you will have an obligation to cooperate with the Shadow Authority in order to help them set that budget.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I want to build on the questions that have been put by Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Ripton, Councillor Hobson, and the question from Councillor Burfoot on the previous item. We're discussing a £2.25 million underspend, which we discuss every year. And by my accounting, it's something like £11+ million over the past 6 or 7 years. And we have the same discussion every year. Whereabouts in reserves will we put it? It's always about putting it into reserves. We hear from Councillor Burfoot, we can't afford to water the plants. Councillor Hobson's right. We can only afford 100 signs. Faced with an existential threat from wildfires, we can afford 100 signs, but we have to ask the parish councils to put holes in them and go and put them up themselves.
Councillor O'Brien, this is a great speech.
I'm going to come to a question. Okay, right. We have an eminently sensible suggestion from Councillor Ripton about establishing a community regeneration fund. Why do we not get proposals? However we've titled them, why do we not get proposals to do things? Whatever we call it, we get obsessed with names. We're told, oh, well, you can always come back to a future meeting. We're supposed to be an agile council. It's an arcane system of getting funding to do things. It takes us months and months and months in council meetings. Why do we not say we have a £2.25 million underspend? We know that the whole range of things we want to do. Why do we not just say, let's set aside £500,000 and give it some title, which then enable us to be agile, so we aren't faced with, I can't water the plants because my budget won't allow me to, etc. So we have some flexibility. We've only got a limited time left, and we're handicapping ourselves in not being able to do so. So why, Karen, do you not? Why do we not support introducing that level of flexibility, acknowledging that as a council we want to do things, not.
Well, first of all, this is a report about the outturn. So the financial year 2025-26 has already ended, so it's not possible to incur any more expenditure in that year because it's ended. So what we're asking you to do in this report is to decide what to do with the surplus. Technically, the only thing we can do is put that in reserves. To address your point, what we would need to do is approve a budget for some projects or whatever you might wish to call it, a community project. So members can do that. But if my advice would be, and it's in the Constitution, that any new policy or project that's significant needs to come to council for a decision. And as part of that, you would consider the financial implications, the legal implications, and all of the other things we put in our reports. So I'm not saying that you can't do that type of thing. I'm just saying it needs to be properly considered. You could put the money in a reserve now, ready for that purpose, then bring a future report about that topic and take the money out of the reserve to fund the budget at that point. I don't think we should be
So you'd be
making
happy
decisions
for us
on the hoof.
to do that. You're happy for us to put X whatever it was into bureaucracy without knowing how much that bureaucracy is. We're happy to do that. LGR funding.
I think
happy to spend on bureaucracy without knowing how much it is. But so you are happy for us to establish something with a title.
It's all about relative priorities and obligations. LGR is going to place an obligation on us that we can't avoid. Some of the things you might be thinking of might be essential to certain communities, but some of them might be just nice to have things. We need to weigh up the resources we've got available. And to my mind, it's important that we take the opportunity to meet this coming obligation and bear that in mind before we start spending on other things.
Okay, you've had an answer there, Councillor Wayne.
On obligations, I think as a council we have got obligations to our communities, and it's really important that we, what Councillor O'Brien has just gone and mentioned, we shouldn't go rattling it all off into a safe little haven. We should, yes, I take what Paul said about it's important to have this, but what I want to see as a councillor is when you know, and I'm surprised that we don't know what the other districts have got, when you know what their sort of cash situation or the money that they are going to be putting in, what their reserves are, because the last thing I want is for this to, we've gone through this before, the last thing I want is for this council to be seen as, because we're very cautious about things and we're going to jeopardise. Well, we're failing in our obligation to our members of the public. So I want an assurance, please, that as soon as you know, or if you can find out what all the other boroughs and districts have got, we need to know that, and I'd be very interested to know what they're doing with their money. Whether they're putting money into £500,000 into a fund that, yes, we can come later on to the council, full council, and sort it out. But have you any idea when you'll be able to get all those details, Paul, about the actual reserves for the other boroughs and districts, please?
Through you, Chair. I think that information will come pretty quickly now, because clearly when the case for change document was submitted, everybody shared their information at that point in time. Things have moved on now. We've obviously got the decision. We need to start to think about the resources required to establish those new authorities, and the issues regarding proportionality and who pays for what. That will come as part of that process. In terms of the time frame for that, I probably don't think we'll get to that until perhaps the end of this year, I would guess. But every authority is having the same discussions. I discussed with my colleague chief executives, and they're receiving the same demands from their members, that they want their corporate plan completed, they want all of the projects completed before the authority exists, and there is reluctance to put money into LGR. So what you're saying is no different to what every other member of any other council across Derbyshire is saying. But there's just no getting away from the fact that we are going to have some bills, and we need to have some means of paying for them.
I understand that, and I sincerely hope that the current government and the people that are arranging LGR scrutinise to make sure that no particular districts or boroughs are unfairly burdened, if you know what I mean. That because we should not be paying any more than relatively to anybody else. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I've just got two hands up. Can I take Councillor Flitter first? Is that okay?
Yes, Chair. Just before Councillor Flitter moves, I was just wondering if we're moving to the proposal, because that's what I was going to be doing.
I feel we're getting close to it. Yes, yeah. But these are actually very, very important questions, and I'm pleased that we're actually getting some answers to this, which will be really to the heart of what's going to happen over the course of the rest of the council. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, I struggle with this one, Chair. I have great respect for our financial team to this council. They've steered us well for well over 40 years, 50 years. And I'm apt to take their advice. The one thing that I can't understand is that we're trying to put the horse before the cart yet once again, and we don't seem to learn. So my question, and I'm coming to one, is that if we put something under something called Community Regeneration Reserve, which I want the Village Regeneration Reserve, so that everybody within the Dales gets a fair share, and it's being put down as a grabbing pot, that to me doesn't need to happen. It needs to be shared out equally amongst the residents of Derbyshire Dales. But if you create at this particular time a community regeneration reserve, that has not got any terms of reference because they have not been decided on yet. How can you draw that money out and make the decision that that project that you want your money to go for straight away meets that criteria? The process is that we get the terms of reference. I should put to leaders this month, August, and by the 1st of September, it'll go to the PA. And then if it gets approved, then it comes back to this council after going to the leaders advisory group. So everybody's involved. Then we can set the terms of reference for that pot of money, and we can all start to work within the confines of either the restrictions of that. 271,000, I must admit, seems a nice figure. I would like a bit more, like a lot of people, but we don't know how we're going to get that. So how can you create that reserve and operate it now before the terms of reference? So I'm hoping that we actually support the motion by Karen, and then we come back in September and actually know what we're voting on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we're definitely moving out of questions now, I feel. Councillor Bond.
Yes, Chair. I mean, this agenda item is about the outturn report, and I would like to propose the recommendations as they're set out as they are. I think the reason is very clear and made clear under 14.1 that this council has an underspend in 25-26. And that's notwithstanding the projects that we mentioned in agenda item 9, which are significant in themselves and addresses a number of issues that have been raised regarding social housing and other community projects. That we do need to be prudent going forward. That we sit in this chamber not just because we are mindful of the needs of the residents that we are elected by, but actually those are the same residents who will be within the new authority. And a number of people in this room will be representing those people. It would be imprudent to declare that there is no money left going into a new authority, and therefore these same people that we represent now will have to fork out for the new authority going forward. And so therefore it is important that we are prudent, that the recommendations are that we've always trusted in the way in which this authority has seen its finances, that we need to be developing further resilience to meet our obligations. And I think the recommendations set that out too. And again, section 14.1 does suggest, and I agree with it, that the reorganisation costs need to be mitigated for the sake of our residents and for the sake of the new authority that some of us and many of us may represent going forward. And therefore, the suggested recommendations are appropriate in these circumstances to make sure that we transfer all that we can in terms of the future success of the new authority. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. Does anybody else want to speak on this matter? I know we've had quite a lot of discussion already, but Councillor Dobbs.
Thanks, Chair. It's interesting, the juxtaposition of item 9 and item 10. I think we've discovered an interesting metaphor for LGR. It's our very own two for shelter, isn't it, really? It's something that nobody particularly wants. It's going to cost some money, and of course it might be misused when we've constructed it. But there we go. I've written a couple of points here. I think timescale. You can allocate funds. We don't exist for much longer. A good project should exist at the moment. If the money's going to be drawn down before we cease to be in a position to draw any money down, I think that needs to be borne in mind. And just to echo Councillor Bond's point, it's the same residents. You know, it's not some other amorphous group of people who blow them. You know, we spent it on this, and this. Hooray! It's the same people, and we need good projects, yes, absolutely. But we've probably run out of road, to be honest. Housing timescale. I mean, I think some of you know more than I do, but I think, you know, we've probably got as much there as we're going to see out in our time. There's some good projects there. But anyway, I commend the motion as Councillor Bond has suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ripson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to support your paper, Karen, but just with a couple of caveats. As I said earlier, absolutely wholeheartedly support the need for LGR reserves. But I think, Paul, maybe you used the words proportionate and balanced, and you know, it's not everything that we do goes into LGR reserves. We take a proportionate and balanced view, I think, as we go forwards. And just picking up on Peter's point, we need to make sure the council doesn't arrive as a new unitary authority dead on arrival. And what I mean by that is it's helpful to have a pipeline of concepts, of initiatives, of potential projects so that this new opportunity, and it is an opportunity, isn't dead on arrival. Actually, it's something to get excited about, that this new unitary authority, with all of its officers co-located and working towards a common aim, can actually pick up and run with. So we'll go with the paper tonight, but let's not forget this conversation when in the autumn the papers come back and we are potentially asked or have the opportunity to put money into some of those concept or initiatives.
The phrase oven-ready projects springs to mind, but yeah. No, okay, fair enough. Councillor Slack.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Simon. A few years ago, when the cinema project collapsed, as we know, we did that amount of money spare. And if we didn't act quickly, the government was going to grab it back again. And fortunately, we got 2 projects ready. Wordsworth have got the Meadows project already, financed and everything. And Matlock have got the Orleans project all financed. And that's what we need. We need projects now which have got finance to them and everything, and then put them forward for this money. So yeah, Simon's right. We need to have oven-ready projects now. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Brien, did I see your hand waving?
You did, Chair. I mean, I have to record my disappointment. I'm not critical of officers. I'm critical of ourselves as a council. I'm critical that we've got £2.25 million, and we're happy to send over £1 million of it to pay for more bureaucracy. And as Councillor Fitter said, costs spiralling out of control, and not a single penny of that £2.25 million goes for the benefit of our residents. I think it's really disappointing to me that however we arrive at this, that's our intention. That's the summit of our ambition. With this level of underspend, to spend almost half of it on bureaucracy and nothing to the benefit of our residents.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with Councillor O'Brien. I think I find it shameful, really, to put that much money aside when we don't know the full cost of LGR or what our commitment would be, but we're just taking a punt when I can walk through my own communities and see projects that kind of just lack of investment at district level that we haven't invested in. I'm pretty sure all of us can walk all around our own places and see that. So this idea of kind of putting over £1 million towards LGR, while I accept we will have the commitment, but I just find it so kind of disappointing. And you know what? It feels like Groundhog Day. I mean, Simon's very generous, really, because he says, well, yeah, let's bring it back. We'll bring it back. You know what? I think Peter may have made this point already, but I've been on this council now, what, three and a half years? And every time it is like Groundhog Day. Oh, we've got an underspend. Let's squirrel some money away into our reserve. We will come up with an idea to do some projects and we'll put together a working group to facilitate it. And nothing's happened. And that I don't blame the officers for that. That is us as a council, that is us as an alliance, not gripping the situation and kind of making decisions on behalf of our communities. And everything Councillor Wayne says, absolutely 100% agree. So I can't support this. I can't support this tonight. Not with £1 million in that budget.
Okay, thank you. I think. Okay. Yes. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm sensing in the mood of the meeting that actually they might quite like an amendment that suggests we put, let's take a figure out of the air, £600,000 out of the million into a regeneration stroke housing stroke community ad hoc projects reserve, which then officers know is available and can put in a bid for money that needs to be approved in a separate process, but there is at least a reserve there that can be used. So we've seen that in the housing side. We put aside £500,000 and it has now been used for the Baslow housing and would not probably have come forward as a proposal if we hadn't already have had a housing reserve. So I think that's a good practice. I take Councillor Fitter's points about the terms of reference, but just putting it into a community regeneration reserve, stroke housing, stroke community ad hoc projects would it does not have to specify the terms of reference. You can do that after the reserve has been set up, and then we can clarify exactly how it's going to be used. We haven't done that with other reserves that we set up to determine terms of reference in advance. So I don't think there's a problem from that point of view. And it doesn't commit that money to go to that in the long term. If we then find out through other discussions with other authorities that we do need more in the LGR, I have to say that LGR is making savings. So I'm a bit puzzled why actually it should have a net cost to us, but I don't want to get into the details of that. But it is supposed to be making savings overall, otherwise why are we doing it? That was the purpose of it. So all in all, it just feels sensible to be carrying on doing what we can to improve the district, the community, and indeed the supply of affordable housing to the extent we can. Maybe we can be buying speculative land, for instance, in the Peak District. That would be a good thing to prompt housing officers to think about. My proposal is for amendment to the recommendation that £600,000 of the £1 million extra underspend be put aside into a reserve titled, let's make it community regeneration stroke housing stroke community ad hoc projects.
Okay. Does that find a seconder? Clearly. Don't all rush. I mean, Councillor Nash, you're sitting next to him, so sort of, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly support Councillor Butcher's recommendation or proposal. I think the tone of the meeting tonight has been, we accept we do have an LGR obligation. We do need to start preparing for that. But we also need to make sure that we do deliver the promises that we've made to our constituents over the years, over the next few years, and to make sure that money is reinvested into Derbyshire Dales. There's no guarantee of where that money will go in the future.
Okay. Now, forgive me here if I haven't quite got the exact wording that you were intending, but it was something along the lines of that £600,000 of the council's current year underspend is transferred to a reserve for community regeneration. Yeah. It's your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay, so let's keep it to what I originally said. Community regeneration, stroke housing, stroke community ad hoc projects. And that last one picks up things that various people have been talking about that are required in local areas. But as Councillor Flitter says, it has to be evenly distributed when we come to it.
It comes out of the LGR.
And Councillor Nash, you're happy with that wording, are you?
Just to clarify that the money will come out of the proposed allocation to the LGR fund.
I think we need to make it clear what amount will go to the LGR implementation reserve, just so the minutes are clear. If we take £600,000 and put it in the proposed new reserve, that would leave £421,871 for the LGR reserve.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
Right, sorry, I've got three hands up now. Let's take Councillor Bond first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I really would caution against any decision at this stage in this meeting of allocating anything like a massive figure of £600,000. We have a report in front of us that tells us that our financial resilience has been identified as high risk. And it is our responsibility to mitigate that high risk. And we have done all the way through our tenure as a council, whoever has been in the leading group, that we're asked to mitigate the high risk. And we're being told that it is high risk, and we're being told why that high risk exists in point 13 of the report, and those points are identified very clearly. That's why I'm recommending that we accept the recommendations in the report as they are, and certainly I would be against any off-the-cuff ad hoc decision to divert £600,000 away from mitigating, meeting and dealing with the high risk that exists before us.
Okay, so let's just be clear. We're now debating this amendment. Councillor Slack.
Could I have a bit of clarification on community housing? Because what we badly need in this country is social housing. And can we clarify that it's going to social housing and not community, spread out the community? We desperately need social housing. The government says we need it, and we do need it. And it was clarifying a bit better than just saying social housing. It could mean anything. Community housing, so it needs to be social housing. Would you agree with that, Bob?
Okay, well, the amendment as it stands, I have down in front of me here now, is that the council agree £600,000 of underspend is transferred to community regeneration, housing.
Can we put social housing in that somewhere?
That would be for the proposer and seconder to agree.
Yeah.
They appear to be happy with that.
Right.
Social housing, stroke community ad hoc projects, and that this would come from the local government reorganisation implementation reserve.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Ripton.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to thank Councillor Bond. I mean, it's a helpful intervention. It's a helpful reminder that this is obviously not without risk, but equally, just want to clarify, we're not spending any money tonight. We are simply moving pots of money to signal our intention. The spending of the money, those decisions do come later. So we're not eroding the resilience of the council tonight.
Okay. Councillor Dobbs.
Just to speak to the amendment and also question the amendment proposers. What criteria will be operating to move money out of this reserved account? What criteria would be required for this account to be drawn down? And what criteria will be required in the case of the £400,000 that we've put into LGR running out within 6 months? I mean, do we have to wait for another full council? What if full council didn't arrive in time? Whose word would be required to unlock these? I mean, this is the stuff that happens when you do things on the hoof. You know, locking things up so that you can't touch it is not necessarily the best plan, even if the goals of what you'd like to do with that money are excellent. I mean, we do have a corporate plan which should have all these worthy goals for our entire community locked into it, and we do have a corporate plan reserve. Perhaps we should simply put this money in the corporate plan reserve. Would that help? I'm not sure. It's just that we've had some advice saying LGR is going to be blooming expensive, and this is the sum that we think is appropriate. And I assume they know more than I do.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Well, I just wanted to reassure Councillor Bond that, as we've said, this is not a new phenomenon, this underspend. As Karen will confirm, it's a consistent. Yes, the actual underspends are not recurring, but the fact that we have this significant underspend each year is recurring. And I think I'm right, Karen. We must be approaching £11 million in the past 6 or 7 years. We also have and we're just talking now about the £2.25 million from last year. We've got a general reserve anyway to cover the issues you're concerned about, our medium term financial plan. We're not just, the £2.25 million is not the only reserve we have. We have millions stashed away. That's why we earn all this interest, because we've got all these millions of pounds stashed away doing nothing. So be reassured, we're not going to go bankrupt. We've got more money than we know what to do with.
Councillor Flitter.
Yes, here we are again, an hour or so later than what we need to have been here for, because the report once again gets distorted. I've heard all the comments, and they're the same comments that have come forward for some months now, and that's why we're trying to work for a village community regeneration reserve and pipeline for the future. Now, this again, as I said, is cart before the horse, and people have said to me, but it shows our commitment of intent. I'm not bothered about showing a commitment to intent. I'm bothered about getting things done. And the way to operate a fund is to have a proper set of rules, if you like, to actually operate and decide what fits that criteria. We have to set that criteria. And from the discussions tonight, quite frankly, I'm seeing that we're setting up a regeneration reserve and we're going to have one hell of an argument about where we go and spend that. And that's not what I want. I want Grindleford, Marston Montgomery, whatever, throughout the district. You know, I want them all to get the same treatment. It's Derbyshire Dales. I don't want a bum fight. And when I hear, again, councillors saying, we're not doing anything, we're not putting any money in, what do they think this project is for? Let's develop it properly, for God's sake. Don't let's go off half to cocked because some politician wants to get on with the job and do it. We've got to look at the risk. We've got to look at the criteria. We've got to look at the management. And that's all been done. And it will come before you within the next few weeks. What is the rush? Because you can't do anything with it.
All right. Okay. I think we're now ready to move to, I'm going to say to move to a vote. Councillor Buttle. This is on the amendment, I mean.
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody on this.
Everybody?
Yeah, almost everybody. But like, our real issue is we just don't have the staff and the people to push these projects. Like, if we've got the money and we're not pushing forward as well and as effectively as we could, this is my feeling anyway. So I'd very much like us to think. I'm less worried about the name of the regeneration fund. We could easily move these monies into the corporate plan project fund, whatever. But we've got to sort of get a grasp of the fact that we're not actually getting anything done. We're doing really well on housing. We're doing pretty good on quite a few other things. But I really do want us to start moving forward and actually using our last moments to actually have a, like something to be proud of when we're finished.
All right. Okay. Now, this debate is going on a little longer than perhaps we'd intended. Before we go any further, can I see a proposer and a seconder to extend, if necessary, by half an hour? Councillor Butcher and Councillor Dobbs. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Paul, I think you'd like to come back just with a comment.
I'd just like to make an observation, Chair. I think it's disappointing that members think we're not getting anything done, because you set a corporate plan 2 years ago. In the last couple of weeks, you've had an update on that corporate plan. It contained more than 100 projects. We've delivered more than half of them. We're making massive progress on delivering your housing ambitions. We've just completed a £15 million regeneration programme in Ashbourne. You've invested in additional staff. The key thing is the council needs to agree its priorities and decide what you want us to do and when you want us to do it, because it's the different priorities which are causing these issues. And until we get clarity on what your priorities are and how you want these resources spent, we're going to have this debate time and time again. But I really do take issue with any claims that the council is not delivering, because we are.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Right, I'm now going to take us to the vote on the amendment that's been put forward. Are we all clear what that amendment is? No, you're not clear. Okay, I will read it. That's okay. You could be forgiven for not being clear. All right. So the amendment is that in addition to the 3 recommendations that we've got here, I think that's right. This is an additional recommendation, isn't it?
Recommendation 2.
So it's an amendment to recommendation 2. Yep. And that would read, in addition to the words that are there, that £600,000 of the underspend is taken to reserve for community regeneration, social housing and community ad hoc projects, and that this would come out of the local government reorganisation implementation reserve. Okay.
Chair, it might be better to say that would reduce the transfer to the LGR implementation
Reserve to 421,000. Okay. All right. All those in favour of that amendment, please show. And all those against that amendment.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Any abstentions? No abstentions. That amendment is carried. So we now have the substantive motion, which is the 3 recommendations there plus amendment 2 as amended. Does anyone want to speak on the whole?
Could you just tell us the voting numbers?
Oh, sorry, did you want a repeat of the voting numbers? Sorry,
you said it was carried. You just said it was carried, not the numbers of voting each way.
Sorry,
you said it was carried, not the numbers for and the numbers against.
Oh, right. Jason.
Yeah, the voting was 13 for and 9 against and no abstentions.
So we're now voting on the amended motion, substantive. Could I see all those in favour of that, please show. And against? 2 against. Abstentions? None. Thank you, councillors. That's carried as amended, and that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for your patience. Have a good journey home.